All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello everybody, thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Garrett Curtis. I am a SharePoint developer. I've been developing solutions on SharePoint for a few years now. And today we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, sales quoting and customer relationship management. Now obviously, as I'm sure you're all aware, customer relationship management, or CRM, is a pretty big topic nowadays. It's important to connect with your customers and really leverage data to produce better results when we're dealing with the sales process. So what I'm going to show here today is a CRM system that we built on SharePoint using the Infowise set of tools. This tool, the CRM system, is really pretty neat, has a lot of cool features. The one we're going to focus on today, though, is the sales quoting aspect. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let me share my screen. Great. Okay, so just to cover a few ground rules here, go ahead and use the question box if you have any questions. We will cover the questions at the end of the webinar. Let's see. Okay, so here is my CRM system. It's built on Office 365, as you can see here, but it's really built using the Infowise toolset, and that can be used both on Office 365 and on SharePoint on-premises. So everything you'll see here today works on both of the different platforms. Okay, so we start out here with our dashboard. Like any good CRM system, of course, we have a nice funnel chart which shows us the sales process. We have a quick overview here of how many open quotes we have by process, or by step in the process, and then finally a bit of data aggregation here to show, based on all the quotes we've ever done, how many customers are using on-premises using Office 365. Now, let me say that all this data here is just test data. None of this actually reflects our anything in reality. Okay, so let's get started. So if you had a new customer call you up and you wanted to make a new quote, it's pretty easy. We just hit the new quote button, and this is going to launch the add form for the CRM system. Now you might be thinking here, hey, this looks pretty different than the normal SharePoint form. Well, that's because we've used the Infowise tabs to sort of break up the data, and we're only showing fields that actually pertain to the system itself. Okay, so let's run through our little case here. So a new customer calls up. We just go ahead and pick them from the list. Of course, in this case, we can't add any new customers to this list right now, so we're going to pretend like it's one of the customers we already had. Let's say it is Chase Bank here. Okay, contact, we'll go with Ricky. All right, so Chase in this case is looking for a couple quotes on some products. And in this case, we're using just the Infowise product set just as our data point. So first off, we can pick the platform. That's pretty easy. Now you'll see here when I pick a new platform, it actually changes my options in these subsequent drop-downs. This is something that Infowise brings to the lookup fields. We call this a connected lookup. Okay, so they're going to be on-premises, and they want the enterprise version of the product. And what kind of license type? Well, they're just looking for their annual support renewal. Let's see. Well, since they were a good customer, we'll give them a 5% discount. There we go. So that's one line for the quote. So what it's doing here is it's actually making an entry on a different table and then linking the quote lines table to our quote table. So you've actually got this like sort of database style many-to-one relationship here. Okay, let's add another quote. On-premise again, their enterprise. This time they want some training because they want to know how to use the product a little bit better. So again, we'll give them that discount. Okay, great. So as you can see here, we didn't put any costs in. We put a bit of a discount in there, but it actually looked up costs from another table, which is our standard costs table. And so this is all happening obviously in the background, but what we did, we just seeded in all the costs and all the different product types in this table here. So it's going to go look up the standard cost is going to take that discount and it's going to add it to the quote. Right here, so quick description for the quote. Renewing renewing the license and adding training. Great. Okay, down here we have a bit of a sales process area, so we're still in the evaluation stage because they haven't agreed to buy anything yet. The last contact was today, agent name, so this is me, Garrett Curtis. Agent notes, handled call from Chase. Great. Okay, so I'll save that quote. It's just as easy as that. So now the quote's in the system. Of course, we haven't quite sent the quote to them yet, so that's really the next step. If we go back home, though, that data has already been aggregated back up into these charts. So the additional data, or the additional sales there, have been added to the evaluation portion of our funnel. We have a new evaluation step. Okay, so let's say we actually want to print this quote out. Here's our active quote here for Chase. So as far as printing goes, we have a few different options. Of course, you can just print the table like this, or if you are using the Infowise product, we can have an additional print button here, and we can actually set up a template. So I set up this quick quote template. It doesn't look like much, but basically what it does is it summarizes the information from the quote itself. We've got the description, the customer name, quote number, we've got those lines, and then you see here in the background, of course, it summed up the total cost of the lines right there. So I can save this to a PDF, I could print it, I could email it. I have all these options available to me. Here's our quote. Great. So let's save that to my desktop, and then we can upload that as an attachment to the quote itself. Let's do that real quick here. So looks like the attachment adding part isn't working very well, but that's okay because we really don't want to have to do all this stuff ourselves. Obviously, there's a few places where we could make this quote process a bit more automated. So we're going to take a look at those right now. So let's go ahead and add another quote to the system. So first off, like I mentioned, right now we only have customers that are already in our list. So, and this is basically default out of the box. This is a lookup field looking at our customers list. So if we wanted to add a new customer, we could of course just go to the list and we could fill out the customer details there, and then we could go back to our quote, refresh the page, and find it in the list. But of course, you know, if you're on the call with somebody, you need this to be happening much quicker than that. So what I'm going to show you here is a way to actually add a new customer from this screen without having to exit the quote itself. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the Infowise connected field to actually add new list items from a lookup. So to do that, we'll start out by going to our quotes list. And then in the list settings, we're going to use a design button here to get to sort of the Infowise dashboard. And these are all the different features that Infowise has, obviously. So what we're going to talk about right now are the connected lookups. So like I said, I'm using Office 365. If you're using Office, or if you're using SharePoint on premises, you do what I'm doing from the list settings, so you wouldn't have to go to the Infowise design screen. Okay, so let's see. We have two lookup columns on this list, so we've got those filtered out right now. And in this case, we wanted to edit the customer lookup column. Okay, so what we want to do here is allow adding new values. Basically, this lets us add a new value to the customer list from the quotes list. And we're going to turn on the Use New form because there's a few values we want to add, and it's better if they actually get on like a pop-up form rather than doing it all from a single line. All right, great. So that's done. We're going to do the same thing for the customer as well, because in addition to the or the contact rather. So the contact is like the person you're talking to, not just the customer that you had. So we're going to go to our contact and we'll just turn on the same thing. We're going to allow adding new values and we're going to use the new form. One thing you may notice is that we actually have a filter for the contacts, and that's because if you were adding a new quote, you wouldn't want to look through the entire line of all of our contacts. You just want the ones that are related to that particular customer. So what we've done is we've turned on this filter according to parent lookup, and there's a field called customer on, I'll just show you real quick. On the contacts list, we actually have a customer link. So that way we can match customer to customer and just filter by contacts that are from that customer. Okay, but we've turned on that new form. That's what we were here to do. So let's update that. Okay, so now if we refresh this page, we'll see that in addition to our customers in the list, if we had a new customer call up, we can actually hit new item here, and it's going to pop up the customer add form. So let's say we have a new customer. Oh, I don't know. Let's say it's Audi. The industry, automotive. Phone number, just something to fill up the blank here. So I think I've got validation turned on for this one. So if I actually put in a bad email, oh, it's going to take it. Well, that's not good. We definitely want to keep the email correct because that's one of our main modes of contacting people. So not to jump around too much, but let's go take a look at that real quick. So we've got our Audi email, or our Audi list item in here, but the email is set to error. So we really shouldn't be allowing our sales agents to add a bad email in there. So we're going to use something that is called the Infowise default values and dynamic rules in this case. So this is a way that we can limit what, not default values, I'm sorry, that's later. We're going to use column validation. So this is where we limit what sort of entries can be added in the fields. And for email, it's pretty easy. So we're going to check the email column, and then we're going to say that this pattern has to be an email. Simple as that. We can put a little error message in there. You must enter a valid email. There we go. It's going to apply to everybody, so we don't have to limit the users or groups. We'll go ahead and add that rule. So that was pretty easy, a couple clicks. And what you'll see here now, if I try to add a new customer, and it's not required by SharePoint, but if I were to add a new one, we'll say BMW this time, fake phone number, great, okay. Oh, it let it save. I guess I hadn't let that completely finish yet. Okay, let's try this one more time here. Oh, it's because I didn't turn on the validation. All right, here we go. So I've now got that customer in there, and since I have the validation turned on, if I hit save, now it's going to tell me I must enter a valid email. Now it didn't before because I hadn't actually let the page refresh after the rule got applied, so going a bit too fast there, sorry about that. But if we were to put in a real email, and by that I mean a fake email, there we go. It's going to work great because now that matches a email string. So this validation fields are really useful if you want to sort of go above and beyond the out-of-the-box SharePoint validation criteria. Cool. Okay, so we've got a new customer in there. Of course, we're going to have a new contact for this new customer. Same deal here, so we'll make up a fake name. We'll just do Garrett Curtis in there. SharePoint developer. Customer, of course, I'm going to link that back to BMW so that's in the list for the future. Okay, got the contact. So now for the quote lines, we'll just do that the same way we did before. That's pretty straightforward. Let's say they're on Office 365. They want a whole tenant worth of users, and they want the unlimited users option. Okay, so we'll add that quote line. Great, there we go. Okay, so we'll just skip down a little bit here. Now here I have to put in the agent name. Now the idea with this field is this is the sales agent who's actually taking the call and can be working with the customer in the future. So I'll put my name in here for now. But usually this is always going to be the person who's actually doing this work. So it's the person who's logged on. So we should be able to use a default value to populate this field with the current person who's logged on rather than having to make them actually type in their name every time they use the tool. So I'll show you how to do that next. All right, again, we're going to add that default value from the Infowise design screen. And in this case, we actually are going to do the default values. And in this case, it's going to be the agent name. So we want to apply a dynamic rule because we want to calculate the correct name based on properties of the system. So the value here, I'm going to show you the Infowise value picker. Basically, I can use any sort of value from the list already, or I can use functions to get the value from all sorts of different areas. But in this case, it was pretty straightforward. We're just going to do the current user. So we want this to populate the current user to the agent name. And we want this to happen when the item is new, not necessarily when it's being edited, because maybe you want to override that for some reason. There we go. So we've got the rule applied. Very simple. We'll just save that, and I'll let it finish this time. Okay, so it's going. So basically what this is doing is it's adding a rule to where as soon as we open up a brand new quote, it's going to automatically pre-populate that field with the current user, in which case it's me, of course. But this works well for any sort of, you know, date fields or lookup fields where there's like a default value based on other criteria, because you can use conditions in there too. Okay, so let's make a new quote, and what we should see here is that the agent name was pre-populated with my name since I'm logged on. So that's a pretty neat trick. Okay, next up to clean this up. So we've got the quote template set up. So like I showed you before, if we wanted to go print one of these quotes, we can open the item, we could say print, we're going to get this nice template. For the quote itself, we can save that to a PDF. That's what we had here. But wouldn't it be great if we could just do all that with one click and maybe actually have it attach itself directly to the quote entry in the system rather than having to go save it to the desktop, upload it back into the system. Nobody wants to deal with that. So to do that, we're going to use another nifty Infowise feature, and that is the Infowise Actions. So again, I'll go back to my Infowise dashboard. We're working on the quotes here. So I'm going to edit the actions in this case. Now, like the name implies, of course, actions are sort of like workflows. They're automatic things that you can trigger, and they can do all sorts of things like update list items. They can delete list items, talk to databases. You can send emails. In this case, we are going to be printing. So I'll choose print list items, and we'll call this rule print invoice. Great. Okay, so I'll just progress through these tabs here real quick. Nothing to do on that tab. Here's sort of where we're going to configure what gets printed. So in this case, we're going to be printing from the current site. We're going to be printing from the current list. I must tell it what items I want to print. So I'll do ID equals ID. Oops. And this basically just tells the system I only want to update the current item, the item where the ID equals the current ID. We're going to use the quote template. We're going to export that to a PDF, and then we're going to attach it to the item. So this action is actually going to do all of that printing work that I had to do manually for us. And now I have to specify the file name. Again, I'll use the value picker. I'll probably just name it the same thing as the quote number. Quote number is just a automatically generated string that sort of just increments. So if I make that equal to the quote number, at least it's always going to be unique. There we go. Okay, so now conditions. It's basically when do we want this to run. I have a checkbox set up for this. So if I go show you one of these quotes, there's actually a nice generate quote checkbox in here, and you can see I've already got the check quote added in this case. I'll delete the old quote. When I hit that checkbox, what I want it to do is print the quote, attach it to the attachments, and then also take a snapshot of the date, because I want the current date and then also the date sort of when the quote expires, when we need to follow up with the customer about whether or not they're interested still. So I'm going to do, since it's a checkbox, it's pretty easy. It's called generate quote. There we go. And after it changes, I want it to be yes. Basically that means as soon as somebody checks it and saves it, the value will be yes, and now it's going to trigger the print action. So I'll save this action, and then I'm going to move it up in the list because actions happen from top to bottom. I want it to happen before the quote checkbox gets reset. So that action is an update action, and it sets the quote to no after the quote is set to yes. That's a pretty simple action. Okay, action's in there now, so I think we're ready. If I refresh this quote, I've got the old quote in there, so I'll delete the old quote out. There we go. I'll save it. Okay, let's go take a look at this quote. So I'm going to hit generate quote. It's going to make the date equal to today. I set up a 2-week window for the quote to expire. So I'll save it. Now in the background, it's going to go and trigger all of those actions that I had set up to happen when that checkbox was checked. We'll see it worked because we'll get a little paperclip here for an attachment. It takes a little while for these actions to run, but there you go. You see it's already done. So if I go back into the quote, there we go. I've got my attachment. Ta-da! I've got the quote date. I've got the quote expires date. All pretty straightforward. So that's really easy. With one click, now I can just have the quote automatically added to my Sharepoint list. Okay, looks like we have a bit more time, so let's talk about something else. So if we're going through this process, we get the quote, we send that to the customer, they have a few, up to 2 weeks to sort of mull it over and decide if they want to do it or not. But when those 2 weeks are over, our quote actually expires, and you can see that I had a quote expiry date on there. And that was just a calculated field that's 2 weeks or 14 days after the date of the quote. What I'd like to have happen is I want the system to email all of my sales agents when they have quotes that are nearing the expiry date and nobody's gone in there and moved the goalposts, if you will, to purchasing or closed. So I'm going to set up a automatic email alert that's based on this quote expires field. And of course, normally if I was going to set up an email alert using Sharepoint, I'd be limited to the alert me field, but since we're using the Infowise tools, we have the add alert option. What this is basically a more fully featured alert tool. So I'm going to make a brand new alert here, and we'll call it notify, N-O-T-I-F-Y, agent when quote is expired. Okay, so this section we're going to tell it who we're sending the quote or the email to. Of course, I only really want to send the email to the person who, to the actual agent on the case. So in this case, we're going to use a user in a column. And since the agent name, that was the one that we pre-populated with the agent's name, since that's a people picker, we can actually send it directly to their email on the system. If we wanted to, we could actually set an alert up to send an email to an outside address. So we could, fake@fake.com, we could send this email outside of SharePoint as well. That's a pretty neat feature. Okay, we can actually specify the from address, so we'll say crm@infowise.com. Okay, so now this gets pretty cool. What do we send here? So we'll send the item, we're going to send a email when, according to a date. So we want to send the email when the quote expires. So maybe actually we'll send it 1 day before the quote expires. That way they have a day to actually action the system. So we're going to send it 1 day before quote expires. Now we really only want to send the quote or send this email, sort of a nagging email, if the process hasn't moved. So the default quote status is 1 evaluation, then we go to purchasing, closed, or if we have to cancel the quote, we get canceled. So if somebody has moved this over to purchasing, we probably don't need to send the nagging email out because they've already agreed to purchase the quote. So in this case, I only need to send this if the status always equals, we'll say always contains 1 dot. There we go. And it's 1 dot because, of course, the very first status is 1 dot evaluation. I could just put the whole 1 dot evaluation in there, but if I change the names in the future, at least that rule's still going to work. All right, great. So we're going to send the email to agent name 1 day before the quote expires. I could delay the email, but that doesn't make much sense in this case. And then finally, we can configure a mail template. By default, it's set up to be the default template, but we can actually create new templates. Here's the default template. It's just very straightforward. So we'll call this template quote expired. Okay, so subject, dear, we'll put agent name in there. So dear Garrett Curtis. Oh, that's probably more of a body thing. Dear Garrett Curtis, a quote is nearly expired. Please contact the customer. And then we're going to add a link to the item. There we go. CRM quote expiring. Great. So it's a very simple email. Subject CRM quote expiring. Dear Garrett Curtis. a quote is nearly expired, and then I'm going to give them a link to get directly into the item from their email. There we go, and then I'll just set that as my template, and I've got my alert. So now a day before the quote's going to expire, your sales agent will get a email telling them they should probably action this or follow up with the customer. Okay, but that's really all I had set up for my demo today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. To cover a few things, of course, I did this in Office 365, but this will work just as well in SharePoint on-premises. If you're using on-premises, this will work for Foundation, all the way up to Enterprise. You can have any version of SharePoint. It will work great. If you want more information, feel free to reach out at InfowiseSolutions.com. That's our, oh, probably help if I spelled it right. There we go. InfowiseSolutions.com. You can log on there and get a demo or a free trial if you'd like. Just test it out. This webinar is going to be recorded and will be available on YouTube and I think our blog as well. So it was great having you. I'm going to take the next couple of minutes here and answer questions that you guys have submitted throughout the presentation. Okie dokie, so let's see. Okay, so first question, why would you use the Infowise default value instead of the built-in me in the SharePoint native field? You're right, I could have probably done that using the, this is pertaining to when I add a new quote. I want that name to be the default agent name of me. I think I could have done this using SharePoint, although I've had issues in the past doing it. But really this was more of an example of things that we could do with that default value. Of course, I picked a name here, but it could be anything. It could be a date, it could be some sort of calculation, it could just be text, anything that you want to do. Okay, let's see here. Will this work in SharePoint 2016? Yes, it will work in 2016. You just have to contact us for your free trial, and you can get started on SharePoint 2016 right away. Okay, how do we overcome list view thresholds for this situation? So I believe what this question is pertaining to is list view threshold. So I assume this is probably the case where there can only have so many line items in SharePoint, in a SharePoint list before we start having issues. You're going to run into that with any long SharePoint list. We have some options though. You could use an Infowise action to sort of copy the list items from the main quote list into sort of an archive list. So you could create an archive list like for 2015, 2016, or maybe break it up by quarter. And that way your users aren't using this crazy long, 22,000 line item list. You've got them broken up into separate, smaller lists. Of course, if you're really working on a really big system and you'd like it to have a lot more capability, you could actually put the back end of the list in a database, and then we can connect to databases using the Infowise product. I'll just show you that real quick here. If you want to sort of have a database back end and use SharePoint for the front end, or sort of mix it up a little bit and have some information in your database, maybe you have a database of customers and you want to do a CRM system in SharePoint, but you don't have the customer list in SharePoint, we can actually connect to databases and read information off of them. So back in the Infowise design screen, we have the imports. So from here, we can actually import data from emails or from web services. So any sort of REST service all the way up to a Microsoft SQL database, anything that you can think of really, we can connect to those and query data. We can actually trigger stored procedures, all sorts of great stuff if you want to connect to databases. Okay, let's see. One more here. Can actions be ran on a schedule on specific list items or all items in the library? Great question. So what we're asking here is, are we able to sort of do a daily or nightly update? And the answer is yes. So we can set an action up. My action I set up using a run on event, new or edit. Another option, of course, is timer-based. So just like those email alerts, we can send out daily emails, weekly emails, monthly emails. We can, based on dates, we can trigger actions there. We can set it up to run using conditions, like say we can run on the item where ID is 9. Pretty straightforward. Or if you wanted to, you could run on the item where the ID isn't 0, which basically means it's going to update every item in the list. So that's how you can sort of control all of these sort of timed actions. Okay, one other option, this is pretty cool. You can actually set up actions to be run from the toolbar. So if we go back to the site, rather than triggering them automatically, if you wanted to set up an action, we can actually go in here and run actions from the view screen. I don't think I have any defined for this list, but you can actually put actions here, so you click the button and then the action runs. And rather than the view screen, you can also do that if you turned on the selection to run actions from the whole list itself. I can run actions from there as well. Okay, so another question. I know we're running a bit late, but I'll stay here and answer questions if you guys keep having them. Next question up. Let's see. So is there a workflow capability? So this is, do we want to run out-of-the-box SharePoint workflows? Yes, we can actually run actions that trigger workflows. So you can connect the two together using the Infowise actions. Okay, another question. Can the template that generates PDF be customized? Absolutely. So that's a really great feature here. If we go into the Infowise design screen and we go down to the print and export setting, we can actually configure the template. So here's my quote template that I was showing you guys earlier. I did this in advanced mode. We can also do this in simple mode, where we just sort of drag over columns and it prints a long list item. But if you go to advanced mode, you can actually use HTML, use tables obviously here, or you can use this editor to put together any sort of template you want. You can use fields from the list. So for example, my quote had used the contact, the title, those dates, the description, those line items, which were sort of a nested table. I can just get the whole table by putting in one line here. So you can do this to make all sorts of really great emails, or great printing. And of course, this is very similar to the emails as well. So you can set up your emails using HTML as well. Okie dokie, next question. Can web forms support digital signatures? Great question. So yes, it can. We actually have a Infowise column called a, where is it? There it is, signature. So this signature field you can set up to basically use your mouse. You can just click and you can like sign your name with the mouse, and it saves you can set it up to, that's a handwritten one obviously. You can also set it up to, you just enter the name and it stamps it as it's been signed. So that's a pretty great feature too. Okay, let's see, what else we got here? Lots of good questions, guys. Keep them coming. Can we set a lot of Infowise setting on a site template and copy the site template multiple times and keep the Infowise settings? Yes, absolutely. All of the Infowise settings, everything I've showed you today, gets stored in a template. So if you were to templatize this CRM system, you could copy it to other sites using a site template, and it's going to copy over everything that we've customized. And that works both on-premises and 365, of course. Okay, good. Let's see. Does it integrate with DocuSign? That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure on that. If you want to follow up with us via an email on our website, I'm sure we can answer that question for you. Next question, can you copy and paste actions? This is something I run into a lot. It's kind of tedious sometimes to create lots of actions, but unfortunately we don't have a way to copy and paste actions. Aside from, like I just said, if you copied the whole site template over, you could duplicate everything in the site, including the actions. But otherwise, I don't actually have a way to copy and paste actions. Okay, let's see, anything else? Can the app be used on different media breakpoints? Interesting question. I'm not quite sure what that question is asking. If you want to clarify a little bit in the questions box, I can get back to you on that. But it looks like that is all of the, responsive design. Okay, great question. So what I was showing you there was, so the asker came back to me, so will this be, can you use responsive design to sort of design your tables? To a certain extent. Like I showed you here, if we go to a new quote, this whole form here was done using the Infowise we call them tabs and layouts. So if we go back to our design screen, I can show you that real quick here. Tabs and tab permissions. So I had set up, you'll see here I've got customer details, quote details, sales process, and there they are there. I can click on that guy and I can sort of drag and drop different columns over. It is possible to set up custom styles using CSS. So we have two options. Obviously you could set up your site, what was it, the theme, the master page theme with your CSS file to actually directly edit the Infowise fields. Or if you wanted to just to limit the changes to a specific list, you can actually put Infowise CSS items in here, and that's going to control all the aspects of the Infowise form, whether it's sort of the width or the colors or anything like that. You can do that using CSS. And of course that lends itself well to responsive design. So I would say yes, that you could use responsive design with the Infowise product. Cool, cool. Okay, well that's really all the questions we had. So thank you guys so much for joining us. It's really been a pleasure. Of course, like I said, this webinar will be has been recorded and will be put up on YouTube. But yeah, it was great to have all of you. I hope that you head on over to infowisesolutions.com and set up a demo or a free trial. I'd love to talk to you again. All right, have a good day.